Okay, so this is called but you did a great job. To me, this meeting facilitation skill is extremely important, not just for meetings, but communication in general. And I've taken some facilitation training and I've done a little facilitation and really enjoy it. It's great when you can have good meetings so you get things done. And Mary's very good at that. So thanks, Mary, for joining us and hosting this for us. Looks like we've got 15 people on the line. Looks like we have a mix of staff, quite a bit of staff, and crew members, and maybe some crew leaders as well, and staff from the course. And so we've still got some people trickling on, and I think I will turn it over to you, Mary, if you want to go. You ready?
Sure. Hey, y'all. Good to see you. For those of you who can turn on video, I would love for you to do so. You know, one of the challenges with us going virtual all the time is that we lose some of that connection that you get by being in a room with a person. And one of the pros about being able to be on video is that we can still get a chance to see each other's reactions. You know, if you're laughing, if you're smiling, a lot of, you know, facilitating a meeting really depends on, you know, kind of finding your place and figuring out how to read different things that are happening in the room. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, but thanks y'all for joining us. And as Jeff mentioned, and some of you may or may have not been able to hear as he deals with the rainstorm, I'm Mary. I sit in South Carolina, and I serve as our Southeast Director of Marine Conservation. So I work with our folks from North Carolina down to Florida on a wide array of coastal and ocean issues. But in this job, I do a lot of facilitation. And when we think about facilitation, what it really means is it's someone who helps come in to help ease how a meeting gets run. To facilitate something means to make it easier. And so the goal of being a facilitator is that you're helping your team or the meeting go a little bit easier. So that's what we're going to talk about today. What are some of the, you know, just initial skills that can help you do that? We'll practice them. And then we'll also get a chance to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that can come up. Because unlike what all of you, I'm sure, some people can be challenging in a meeting. I know y'all are going to be great and listen well and give feedback, but we find that there are different personalities that can make a meeting go challenging, and there are ways to deal with those. So we'll talk about those as well. But the first thing I like to do is to let us I'd love to get to know who you are quickly, because I haven't met a lot of you. And so if we could just do a quick round robin, and I'll call out the names, and you can just tell me who you are, where you're currently located, and maybe share one of your favorite things that you've done working with Golf Corps. What's something that you have enjoyed, so I can get a sense of kind of who you are and what you like to do. So I'm just going to work my way across the screen, and just unmute yourself when it's your turn. And it looks like Tia, you're the first person on my screen, so if you wouldn't mind starting.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tia Blakeney. I'm located in Gulfport, Mississippi, and I work with the Corps Network. And my favorite thing with Gulf Corps is being able to help the crew members, place them in jobs, and help them with professional development.
Awesome. Daniel Bright.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm from I'm in the Houston TXCC office. Something I've done that I enjoyed. I guess learning to step outside my comfort zone and learning how to interact with people.
Great. Franklin's Promise Coalition.
So hello, my name is Joe Taylor and I'm the Executive Director for Franklin's Promise, and we're fortunate to facilitate the Florida Cruise, Conservation Corps of the Forgotten and Emerald Coast. And so I apologize, but I am doubling up duties today. We are delivering food to our senior citizens here. And so Will, who's my delivering partner, and I are in Apalachicola. So that's part of our alternative duties, is out putting food for those folks who are supposed to be home quarantining.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you for your efforts to deliver food as well. We were just talking the other day about during this time how groups like the Nature Conservancy can do some to give back to some of the other NGOs in our community that are having more immediate challenges in some way than some of the things that we're facing. So great to see that overlap. We're all one joint group. So
Hey, Joe.
Good morning.
Hi, I'm Eileen Yell, and like Tia, I work with the Corps Network, and I'm based in Gulfport, Mississippi. I'm a program coordinator, and I think my favorite thing so far to do with Gulf Corps has been to actually be at orientation with the young people, kind of like Tia, but to be there with them, interacting with them, getting to know them, helping them with professional development, doing interactive sessions with them. And so my presentation skills have been in person. So this whole virtual thing is new territory for me, and I'm very uncomfortable with it. So I'm really looking forward to learning some great things from you and from each other. Sitting in on these sessions with each other is a great opportunity to learn too.
Great. Bird, you're next.
Morning, everyone. I'm Bird Davidson. I'm a TNC AmeriCorps Stewardship Assistant, and I am in Pensacola, Florida. And for me, I've gotten to work closely with the crew, so that's been rewarding to kind of see them grow and see them pick up different things.
Great. Elizabeth.
Good morning. I am Liz. I am the crew leader for the Texas Conservation Corps, and my favorite thing about Gulf Corps is doing the projects, and it's been killing me to not be out and be in the coastal prairie right now.
I am sure, yeah. Alexis.
Hi, I'm Alexis, and I'm also out of the Houston office and with TXCC. My favorite thing is probably like being able to learn how to chainsaw and gain some confidence, because a lot of people don't expect it from me. So
that's awesome.
Kind of to show off those skills and learn new things and be pushed out of my comfort zone is the best thing that's happened.
Great. Kat.
Hi, I'm Kat. I'm from TXCC in Houston as well. My favorite thing about being in Gulf Corps is probably a combination of getting to work with a diverse group of people and deal with all the challenges and successes that come with that. And then also the project work and being more connected to the environment that I grew up in.
Great. Rob.
Good morning. I'm with Climb CDC out of Gulfport. I'm the program manager, and my favorite thing is being able to place the participants in post-program employment so that they can succeed in life.
Great. Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm also with TXCC in Houston. And my favorite thing we have done is build a extension on a rookery in Armand Bayou.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Stephanie.
Hi, good morning. My name is Stephanie Mathis, and I sit in Long Beach, Mississippi. Normally I would be in our office in Gulfport, but we're not doing that right now. And I am with the Core Network. I have so many things about Gulf Corps that I've enjoyed, that I'm so proud of, and that I feel just completely blessed to be a part of. I've been with Gulf Corps since before it was actually a program, and just to see how successful it's been, myself being pushed to new limits, and going to different meetings and learning things about environmental work and projects. But hands down, anything that has to do with members, or we can be around members and see them face to face or stand side by side with them, would be absolutely my favorite thing.
Yeah, great. Catherine.
Hey guys, for those that don't know me, I'm Katie Moss. Started the program as Katie Flowers, got married. Katie Moss now, sticking with the nature names. I am an AmeriCorps member, doing education and outreach for the Gulf Corps program. I'm based here in Mobile, but probably my favorite part of my position is getting able to travel and hang out with the crews and get to meet everybody while they're doing their field work. And probably my favorite experience with that was hanging out with TXCC and ACE, doing mangrove planting in Texas. That was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Christina, and then Emily, and then I think we're got everyone.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I have different headphones on, so I want to make sure. I work with Jeff as the program specialist for Gulf Corps. I'm in Foley, Alabama. Our office is in Mobile, obviously, working from home. My favorite part is going out and meeting the people, but we're probably not going to do that for a while.
Yep. And then Emily.
Hey, can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm Emily Thornton, and I manage Louisiana Conservation Corps, and that's in Baton Rouge. I'm currently actually in Mississippi working remotely. I would say that recently my most favorite thing has been learning how to deal with the different personalities, like you were saying, that some people don't do so well speaking up in a lot of these video meetings. And so I've loved the opportunity to learn how to deal with that and get people to speak up more and be more involved. So yeah, I've just enjoyed the learning experience.
Great, and we'll definitely have some time for questions at the end so that people have a chance to kind of, if you've run into challenges or you want to brainstorm with the group how we can do things, that's welcome as well. So I'm going to go ahead and kickstart. I do have a presentation. It's not anything fancy, but it's meant to kind of just help guide some of we're going to start off with a little bit that's going to focus on just core components to what it means to be a facilitator. Then we'll do a little exercise, then we'll take a break and shift over to how we can work with different types of people, and we'll play around with that as well. If at any time you need to get up, feel free to get up. If you have a question, down at the bottom you have your chat, so feel free to send a question out to folks. If you're interested in doing that, if you think of a question while I'm speaking and you want to type it into your chat box, we can come back to it afterwards. Those are some things that are really good in a virtual type meeting, giving people that option of how they can engage even when they're not the ones on the screen. So any questions before we get started? If you guys want to raise your hand, that's a good way for me to see. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen then to bring up my PowerPoint presentation. Woo! Go back up to the beginning. And are you guys seeing that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yes.
Are you seeing it in the full PowerPoint view, or are you seeing it in kind of with the
No,
slides?
with the slides on the side.
Okay. Let me just move that over real quick. Oops. Escape. This is always the fun part as well of doing a meeting, is getting yourself set up properly. How about now? Is it the full slides now, Jeff?
No. Same thing.
Now?
Yes. Yes.
All right, awesome. So I did pull in a golf course photo here to start off with our facilitation basics. Because I think one thing is, we often think that you need to be a facilitator. It means that you're doing like some really large meeting. But the reality is that we facilitate all the time, just in our daily lives. We may not be the active facilitator, but we may be facilitating, a discussion with our family or with our roommates. We may bring in some of these skills on a team versus in a big, large meeting. So I think they're useful no matter who you are. What we're going to be doing today is we're just going to learn, and we're going to practice some basic facilitation skills, and then identify some techniques to deal with disruptive behaviors that occur in a meeting. And the first thing that I think is for us to think about is to have a good meeting, be it something like we're having here today, or a smaller team meeting. It's nice to get some core roles described in advance, so that you can be as successful as you possibly can by hosting the meeting. So this is just a brief list of how you can make a successful meeting, who you can give assignments to, in a way that one person doesn't try to tackle everything. Because it can be really hard if you're trying to be the person who facilitates keeping the meeting going, as well as recording the notes and keeping time, and maybe being the team lead. So I think no matter who you are, if you're trying to hold a smaller group meeting, thinking about how much time you've assigned to different tasks and having someone be put in charge of that, identifying someone to be your recorder, and then the facilitator is really the person who helps assign those different roles. And by doing that, you can prepare for a more successful individual meeting. And of course, today we're going to focus on that facilitator piece, that middle person who can help make sure that the recorder is getting things going and keeping track of notes, and that the timekeeper is, knows that they are supposed to be the timekeeper. So one way to think about, and you can tell I'm a marine scientist, is one way you can think about the basic skills that help you in facilitation is using the idea of splash. So a facilitator, in most instances, unless you're specifically called out to be a participatory facilitator, you're asked to stay neutral. So you're the person who's in the front of the room or who's guiding the conversation online and asking questions and clarification and trying to get folks to engage, but you're not trying to share your opinion on what the right answer is. You're trying to help the group come to that. Another thing that's useful is to paraphrase. if I were to make a really long, so sometimes we get folks who are kind of chatty. I can be one of those folks, you may have noticed already on this call. So to paraphrase is this idea of you're listening, can you get the words back out in a simplified way that can get captured and moved into the next level? Third is active listening. This is one of the reasons why I really like, if we're going virtual, being, you know, on screen. When we're off screen, we sometimes wander, and the person who's facilitating can't tell if people are present, and then you need to be present. So I need to be able to look at what's going on with all of you and hear. So really listening, not trying to think about ahead as to what's going to come next, but listening to the words of your team members. The fourth A is ask questions. Don't assume that you know what the person said. If you're not sure what the key point was, or what the idea was, or what the takeaway is going to be, the role is to ask questions. And if there's silence and you're trying to get a conversation going, how can you ask a question that could maybe start that conversation? The third is to summarize. This is different than paraphrase. So paraphrase is the idea of you hear what one person says and you kind of echo it back in a way to make sure you're capturing it correctly. Summarizing comes when at the end of a meeting or the end of a session, you're trying to share the overall takeaways that came from that whole session. So maybe you've had a whole bunch of points come up, and what you're going to say is, well, I heard that the key things we want to move forward with Golf Corps is to make sure that we have the right people learning tools, that we're getting people to understand how they're being trained, and that we keep the team engaged throughout the process. And maybe you've had 15-minute conversation and you're going to come down to like those top 2 or 3 points. The last is to hold up a mirror. And what I mean by that is, if your reaction to how people are looking out in the crowd, and raising that back to them. And we'll get into this with some of our disruptive behaviors, but it's this idea of kind of reflecting back to the group what they're giving to you. And if it's something that maybe isn't great, finding a way to frame it so that they change kind of how they're reacting. And we'll practice that a little later. So splash. Stay neutral, paraphrase, listen actively, ask questions, summarize, and hold up that mirror. There are some other things. So that's kind of how you act. That's kind of like how you present yourself as a facilitator and how you work back and forth. The second set of facilitation skills and tools is more related to how you can make a session or a meeting go smoothly. So how many folks have been in a meeting where you've had ground rules, norms, or agreements set, or been on a team where that's happened? And if someone wants to kind of share what some of those ground rules could be, go ahead and just open up your mic and maybe share with the rest of the group. Any ground rules that you like?
Does anyone remember from orientation?
What was that, Jeff?
Does anyone remember from orientation?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Things like respecting each other, don't interrupt, don't talk over each other, some kind of agreement of how you're going to designate that someone wants to say something, raise hands, stand up, you know, make a noise, you know, something, and even a talking stick, you know, or talking piece to pass around the group, depending on how you're set up, so that everyone feels like their voice can be heard and that things are orderly.
Right. Yeah, those are all great examples. Any other examples that come to mind for folks? Thanks, Eileen.
So Mary, this is Joe. One thing I like is knowing about the bathroom rules in advance, because I typically like to go like every 45 minutes. And so I want to know if I'm expected to stay or if I have permission to go ahead and go and come back and be respectful. So I like knowing that rule in advance.
Yeah. Then there are some that are kind of behavior based, and there are some that are logistically based. And that's a good example of a logistical base, you know, like whether or not you need to just raise your hand and say you need to go, or if you need to step out of, you know, you're allowed to just step out as needed because it's going to be a longer time period. Anything else?
I think it's always useful to have a section for questions from the participants at the end, and just make it clear at the beginning, hey, hold your questions to the end so that the meeting can proceed as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, so that's a good one too. Kind of like how I said, go ahead and chat, put your questions in chat and we'll get to them after a little bit of session. That idea of how am I supposed to be behaving in the meeting and what's my role? Another one I like, just because I like to draw it when I write them on the wall, because if I'm in an actual meeting room, I often write these out so they're up for the whole meeting, and that's a really great tool to have so you can keep coming back to it. But I like Elmo, and I always draw the little picture of Elmo from Sesame Street. But it's enough, let's move on. So have you guys ever been, if you've ever been in one of those meetings where you get so stuck on this topic that's not really your point, being able to say Elmo, and we actually let everybody in the meeting can say it at any point. So it's not just the facilitator. Like if you're starting to hear that you're just running, you can be like Elmo, and then you can be, and then the facilitator can choose, you're right, we kind of have got it overcome. And it's a good one to remember because everyone thinks of the cute little red guy. And can bring that up. Another way to help keep the meeting on schedule and keeping it rolling is the idea of a parking lot, or I often use in my ocean-based meetings, marina. And what this is that sometimes a meeting generates ideas that aren't the core piece to the meeting. So this is making sure that the people who are in the room know that they've been heard, but maybe not distracting from what the meeting needs to be. So keeping a list of that. Again, it can be a great thing if you're in a room to keep up on a wall, so that at the end of the meeting or during a break, you can come back to them, or you can make sure that they're included in the minutes. It can be also something that, you know, you give an assignment to folks, to someone. Like if you're on a virtual call, you may not be able to run the call and be able to ask, keep the parking lot, and it's hard to keep it on the screen if you want to see people. So you could be like, hey, could you be my parking lot person? And then as the facilitator, you just say, hey, Judy, can you write that down and put it in the parking lot so we can come back to it later? I think we've gone over synthesize a bit. That's related to the idea of paraphrasing and kind of coming up with the summary. Does anyone have a sense of what ping pong might mean?
My guess is the way you exchange information back and forth between people.
Right. So in terms of being a facilitator, it's just like a ping pong ball. Someone says something, if it's not detailed enough, or if it's not getting to what you're looking for, you kind of shoot it back to them so that they can, you know, refine it, or you can ask them another question. So it's kind of this back and forth, so you can get to what the core piece is, letting other people hear. And it's also can be something that you use for the whole room. So let someone say something and then let someone else kind of ping pong it back. Well, I heard you said this, and I also think it could be something else. And then I kind of talked about this when I was highlighting my ground rules that I like, labeling sidetracks, and that's where the Elmo comes in. Enough, let's move on. If you label it that, it can really help. So I said that a facilitator is often neutral, and in a large meeting, or even a more formal meeting, that's often the case. Here in the Nature Conservancy, and probably in your work as a team lead for a core team, you may not be a neutral facilitator. You may be much more playing the role of a participant facilitator, which means that your voice is part of the conversation, and you need to be able to stay neutral in terms of your voice isn't louder than anyone else's, but you can bring ideas into the conversation. The other thing that's here is you can be a participant facilitator even if you're not the lead. So has anyone ever been in a meeting where you're like, what the heck is going on here? No one has thought about what we're supposed to be talking about at all, and we are rambling like no tomorrow? Raise your hand if anyone else has ever faced that. I'll raise my hand. I have totally been in meetings where I'm like, what are we doing? Like, how are you thinking that? Who's guiding us here? What are you trying up? So this idea of how can you, in one of those scenarios, without taking over, how can you help the team or the meeting move forward? And there are several ways that you can do this. And now that you're starting to build and think about some of your facilitation skills, you can bring these up, kind of like as Jeff just read, this idea of managing up, facilitating up. So if you've heard a long conversation, but you haven't seen anything written down, you don't know what the point was of the discussion, you could speak up and just be like, can I make sure, can I clarify, or am I capturing this right? Is this what I've heard? And bring what you would do as a summary back to the team. You can offer to be the note taker if there isn't a note taker. But you shouldn't always offer to be the note taker. I got into a frame where I was always the note taker. So try to diversify that a little bit. Let other people be note takers sometimes. But if it's getting crazy, you can become the note taker. You can ask a clarifying question. You and the group can do it. You can even suggest how you organize things. So if it's starting to be kind of this rambling conversation, you could be like, well, what if instead of just having this conversation, what if we just took a pause and let everyone kind of go around and give one thought each? And then come back and see if there's consistency across what we've done. So you're proposing a method that could potentially A, get more people engaged, B, and allow everyone to be heard, because some people don't speak up as much in meetings, and bring a sense of clarity to how things are happening. So you can think about frameworks. You can also either, as the facilitator, which we'll get to in just a moment with some of the different types of folks in a room, but if you've noticed that someone on the team or in the group is not particularly participating, or maybe seems a little bit frustrated, some of the behavior side of things that we'll talk about, you can help bring those people out or get them engaged by asking questions, even if you're just a member of a team. So think of ways in any meeting, whether you're the participant or you're the facilitator, to try to stay on track, to be working towards your goals. And don't be hesitant. Do it nicely. I mean, you don't want to be like, yeah, you're talking all the time. Shut up. I want so-and-so to talk. That's not the right way to bring it in. You want to be like, hey, we haven't heard from Susan yet. Susan, did you have any ideas that you wanted to present to the group or share? Don't be hesitant to do that. It can be really helpful in a meeting. As someone who facilitates a lot, I have to be conscientious. I don't do this all the time. So be aware of it, but be kind in doing it. What we're going to do now, and we're going to do this as a whole group because it's not too many of us, but what I'd like is we're going to do a quick facilitation activity. using that splash component that we did. I'm gonna ask one person to volunteer to be the facilitator, one person to respond. You're gonna be kind of the participant. So you're gonna be asking questions, or we can actually let a couple of people be participants. And then we're gonna identify a few people as observers. So they're gonna be people who just kind of listen to the conversation. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna let this facilitator see if they follow our splash guidelines, provide some feedback on whether or not the person during the conversation is staying neutral, paraphrasing, listening attentively, asking questions, summarizing, and holding up a mirror. So I'm gonna stop sharing so I can come back and see all of y'all. And what I'd love is there's someone who wants to volunteer to be the facilitator. We'll do a couple rounds. All right, Jeff, you can be an observer since it's raining. It's all fun, no stress. It's we're just trying to have fun.
I could volunteer for that.
Awesome. So I just demonstrated another principle that we can use during, look at that band, yep, of storms. Another principle that you can use in virtual meetings, one way to get volunteers is just not say anything. And finally, someone will step up and be like, yeah, I guess it's gonna be me. So thank you, Daniel. I'd like to get, why don't we get a couple of folks, why don't we get 3 folks who would like to be the participants. So you're gonna be answering the question and Daniel's gonna be listening. Who would like to be a participant?
I can be a participant.
Awesome, Kat. 2 more.
I'll volunteer.
All right, great, Eileen. Got 1 more going once. I'm gonna pick on someone if you don't select.
Let's get Matt in on the action.
All right, Matt, you're in on the action. You can pick your favorite Laker to respond as. All right, so Daniel, you're gonna do the start. If the folks who are the participants can go ahead and come off mute so we can, so you can kind of engage in the conversation. For those of you who are observing, which is everyone else, be thinking of listening for the splash components. All right, Daniel, your questions were what makes a good or bad meeting. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to you so you can start.
Okay, everyone, so we're gonna have a little discussion today. We're gonna talk about like what kind of things might make a meeting good, what might make a meeting bad. So I just want to know, what are y'all's thoughts about that?
I have a thought. I think that when there's opportunities for people to speak up when they have an idea, I think that really helps keep people engaged and listening actively to the meeting as it proceeds.
Yeah. What about you, Eileen? What do you think?
Also, one thing that makes a meeting, yes, what makes a meeting good, it can be when everyone knows in advance what the meeting is about, maybe even an agenda, excuse me, and then the participants can prepare beforehand and come to the meeting with ideas or questions or, you know, things like that. And then everyone, a lot of times it's easier to be engaged and follow along with what's going to happen.
That's really good. I like that.
Yeah. Trying like for the leaders to be able to be open with everybody's ideas, even if it's not the idea that they're expecting. Just a ballpark, like out of the ballpark idea could really help facilitate the discussion to continue even farther.
Yeah. So facilitators should have an open mind. It's really good. I like that. Yeah. All right. What about, so those were all good things. What about, if you don't mind going into specifics, what are some things that might make a meeting kind of hard or kind of sluggish? Anyone have any thoughts about that?
One thing that I've experienced sometimes is that when the facilitator doesn't do any kind of participatory activities, they just stand up there, I guess in the lecture format, they stand up there or they're on the camera and they just talk. Or I've heard it called a death by PowerPoint, you know, and there's no engagement, there's no conversation, there's no activity, and everybody just goes to sleep. It's terrible. It's torture.
Shoo, thank goodness I didn't do that.
Those are pretty good. They're pretty good feedbacks.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts before we move on?
I agree with what Eileen said, and then just the opposite of everything we said that was positive. You know, if there's not opportunities for engagement and there's not open-mindedness from both sides of the meeting, it can really detract from getting the message across.
I agree.
That's, yeah, what they said. That's pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Or when the room's too hot.
Fair.
Sucks too. Sorry. That's uncomfortable.
Yeah, that happens sometimes, you know, but it's good for facilitators to, you know, encourage people to participate, you know, and then they don't have that problem so much. And so, yeah.
Great. Okay, so thank you all for all my participants and my facilitator. Now it's the observer's turn. So again, we're doing this just to kind of learn and get a sense of things. So no right or wrong answers, but anything that you observed related to our facilitator. Staying neutral, paraphrasing, asking questions, listening.
I think he did a good job of paraphrasing, somewhat summarizing. So kind of, you know, actively listening and reflecting back what people were saying to him.
Great, thanks. Other thoughts? Well, I'm just gonna go ahead, Stephanie.
It's Alexis, but it's okay. I thought that he did a good job at like actively listening, and he was nodding his head. You could tell that he was interested in what people had to say, and then he kind of gave feedback to them and like interacted with them based on their answer. So I felt like that was a good thing that he did to let them know that he was listening and he did hear what they had to say.
Great. One thing, Dan, just to, I thought you did a great job, first of all. You were very personable, which is hard to do online. You were engaging and going back and forth. I think one thing to be conscious of is, you know, always liking everything, because then it may become, you know, oh, I like that, or I understand that. You said that a lot. And that's not a bad reaction. But what if someone had said something that you really didn't like, and then you had been using like all the time? It could be obvious to that person that suddenly like, oh, I didn't do that right. So being conscientious in terms of remaining neutral can be both avoiding saying negative things, but also being aware that over a long period of time, always being positive, it could come back to be showing as negative by just not saying something. But I think you could have, yeah, that's one thing to think about.
So if I may ask, well, maybe a better thing would be to say, thanks for that response, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Something like, thank you, or just doing the paraphrase where you kind of come back. So what I heard is this: thank you. Did I capture that right? Jeff also just typed in the chat that idea of potentially being able to ask for a little more detail. So yeah, as you're going through. Well, great. Well, I'm gonna, I just saw the note that Texas has a meeting at 10, so you'll be leaving soon. And I get that. It's about 12 till, and I'm actually gonna move on to the second section. So we're gonna be starting to talk just a little bit about the idea of disruptive behavior. And so you guys can jump off them when you need to, because we're gonna do another exercise like this where we kind of get to practice what we would do as feedback. Any last comments before I move on? And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. But any last comments for Dan? And again, special thanks for stepping up and volunteering. All right. Is the screen back up? I'm hoping that it went smoothly that time, since I'm no longer. All right, so common disruptive behaviors. And again, this is you can tell I'm an ocean person. If I was a forest person, we'd probably have deer and skunks and other animals that are going to be used as our examples. But the showing of animals over here on the right are a suite of kind of perspectives that can come into a meeting and be disruptive. And it can be anything from someone who takes over a meeting and kind of dominates the conversation, to someone who remains silent, to someone who just kind of has a critiques everyone, kind of ones up everyone. And so the way I wanted to do this, and I will share this PowerPoint so you can have the full list of kind of the types of behaviors, and think about, how there might be responses. But the way I wanted to do this today, so that it could be more engaging, was to let y'all pick animal, and I will bring up kind of what that means in terms of the type of disruption that could be going on from the group. And then we'll talk about what might be the way as a facilitator to come in and kind of bring awareness to the fact that that behavior is disruptive, and how it might be able to be changed. And you can do that in kind ways. It takes practice. It takes practice to recognize it, but I'll give you this list. Will be a nice starting point. So does anyone want to pick one of our favorite little animals here on the screen?
I'm really curious about the sea lion. Oh,
which one are you curious about, Kat?
The sea lion.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna come out of that mode real quick, and I'm gonna go ahead and come in here. All right. Yeah. The challenge of me double screening is all right, here we go. Sea lion. All right, you're gonna see, I'm gonna keep them in slide mode this time, so that I can easily switch, but let me shrink these over to the side here. Or let me blow it up. All right, so can you guys, sorry, I can't do it on that screen. Darn it. I wanted to bring it up onto my other screen, but I forgot that it didn't work. All right.
What you got, Dads?
There we go. All right, so you guys seeing that now? Let me scoot this over a little bit. The know-it-all, arrogant sea lion, which I'm sure is how you guys all think of sea lions, right? Okay. I'll give you just a moment to read that. I have first had a chance to read it. So the key points here is this is someone who's really assertive and they're going to be a very active participant in your meeting. But they want to be kind of a little bit of the center of attention, and kind of come across as being in charge. So maybe if you have a boss that is coming into a meeting and they're not taking the idea of we're all equal here, they may speak up in a way that their voice gets heard more than the other people in the room. So what might be a comment that you could be like, yo, sea lion, it would be really great if you could blank. What might you say to a sea lion? Anyone think of something?
That's a great comment. Let's open it up to the floor and see if we have any other opinions.
That is excellent. That is a great response. Any other thoughts on the sea lion?
Maybe just acknowledging or validating their experience and their credentials, and then, like Rob said, saying, let's hear from people that aren't as experienced or as knowledgeable, although that feels kind of insulting, so maybe not.
Yeah, you may not want, I mean, I think your first part of that response was awesome. You know, thank you for bringing your expertise to the table. You know, we really want to hear from everyone in the group. Other thoughts, you know, something like that. But it can be good to acknowledge, so recognizing that this is someone who sometimes just that little bit of acknowledgments lets them move on in a way that they will not remain as disruptive during the meeting. Another thing is sometimes you can't call it out during the actual meeting, but if you've noticed a trend, you may want to have a conversation with the person offline, like after the meeting or before the next meeting. So you would have a chance to be like, hey, I've noticed that when you're part of, you know, these calls, we're not getting the full team engagement because, you know, your experience kind of really takes over. Would you mind sitting back and letting other people speak before you came out and, you know, being a little bit more of a listener in some of these scenarios? All right, let's go ahead and try to do another one. I know people are starting to jump off the call, but let me come back up here. And is there another animal that people are interested in exploring?
The crab.
Okay. All right, is it complaining or a negative crab, which is probably not surprising with what we often think of as crabs. And I can actually add to this because I have my little crab hat that I was wearing earlier. So just to diversify. So any thoughts, if you've had a chance to read, on how you might be able to, you know, respond to a crab in a meeting, or, you know, kind of give some initial feedback? It's kind of the whiner or the critic, or, you know, they just don't, whatever you're doing isn't going to meet their needs, and they're going to verbalize that, or they may just sit there and get a little cranky about it. Maybe some of the folks we haven't heard from. I don't know if Rob or Tia or Katie, Bird.
Well, being a Cancer, I take offense to the crab being used as this. But honestly, you're always going to get that dissenter in there. You're always going to get that person who is going to fight the system, and you just have to learn not to minimize them, but respect their views and try to work it in the best way that you can.
Right. So what can you think of how you would, if you heard it, what might be actual response? Like say, hey, crab, thanks for, what would be a statement you can make?
I appreciate the input. Let's see how we can apply that. Can anybody expand on that to help bring it into the focus areas?
Any other? Great. Any other thoughts?
I think maybe asking that person for a solution or what their idea towards the goal might be.
Yeah, that's a great way, is if they're complaining about how something's being done or what someone else has said, asking them to kind of reverse that and come up with a solution can make them turn a little bit more positive, and also, that they're part of the team. Tia, were you going to say something?
I was going to say something like Bert said, try to find a way to make the situation positive, more positive, turn their negative situation to a positive situation.
Yeah. Yeah, and this can also be one that kind of can, again, you could come up with it during meetings, or you can also ask them, like if it's someone who's just kind of sitting there cranky, I don't know if you've ever seen those folks, you kind of get that look on their face and you can just tell. One thing that I do, no matter what the type is just like, hey, what are you thinking about, Eileen? Or what are you thinking about? Could you do you want to share that with the group? Like if it's someone who's having a side conversation, can be a great piece. So I know we're at 11, and I want to represent all your time, because as a facilitator of a meeting, it is bad to go over length of meetings. So just for a moment, so I can see folks. I know some of our Texas folks already jumped off, and appreciate them doing it. I'm happy to spend a couple more minutes doing another disruptive behavior if you would like, for those of you if you have time, but understand we're at 11. So I'll stop and let people comment, and also if you had any questions before you go about facilitation overall, happy to answer those. So how many people have a couple of minutes that they want to stay and kind of have a little bit of conversation? Go ahead and just raise your hand. All right, we got a couple folks. For those of, okay, there you go. Well, why don't we go ahead and do that then? For those of you who need to go, please go, representing your time. I totally get it. And we'll take another, maybe not long, maybe another 10 minutes just to talk about a couple of these and be able to answer any questions that you have. So why don't we start off with questions, so that if someone needs to jump off, and I may be distracting with my crab hat, if people need to jump off, they can ask any questions that they have. I've been looking through what is the best participant animal. The Mary, none of these are meant to be, let's see if I can show you what they are. Why don't we see if there are any questions, and then I'll show you what the different animals are, and you can pick which one you like, or you feel like is most related to what you do. So any just overarching facilitation questions that people want to ask, or a scenario you'd like to discuss before we get into more of our animals.
What's your most memorable facilitator moment?
My most memorable facilitator moment. So many meeting moments. I think I had one where, we came up with a whole, you often think of a whole agenda in play in advance. So you really have tried to think through how to get your meeting to work and to run. And this was a relatively small group, but we were trying to think about how a program moved forward that was facing changes. And we came in with this idea where you were going to get to vote, you're going to do different hat colors, and then have conversation. And several people in the group just hated the idea. Like, you could not get the group to kind of play along with you. And it wasn't play along, it was a way to get feedback quickly. Like, how can you get a whole group, you know, to raise like a red hat, I don't like this, a black hat. And so we had to, on the fly, change to a whole new game plan and come at it instead where we actually had everyone work alone and write down their initial thoughts and then turn them into us and use that as the discussion, because we were finding that they were feeding on each other in terms of being kind of negative crabs, or, you know, just having kind of a personal stake in what was going on that they couldn't let go of. So allowing them to take time to write on their own square what they were thinking, then let us come back to the group to share. So that was a challenging one, because anytime you have to completely shift tacks and think on your feet can be hard. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna come back to sharing and kind of quickly walk through the different behaviors, just looking at the initial titles, and then there we go. Okay.
Hey, Mary, do you find that most people are not aware of which animal they are?
Yeah, I mean, and not everyone's the same animal in every meeting. I mean, there are some people who are, some people are very much, you know, they have a characteristic that comes with them, but sometimes it can be something that's happening in the meeting or where they feel emotionally on that day that can lead it to them. And sometimes they don't know how much body language and things can impact you. So, you know, that's why I think, you know, if it's that idea of taking someone to the side and just being like, hey, not sure if you're aware of that, or, you know, maybe it'd be good to take a break, you know, forming those relationships with the people that you're in the room with, especially if it's a team that you work with all the time, is a good way to get a sense, because it may be something external to what you're doing. And, yeah, that conversation can help. All right, so we're going to start walking through. So we already did the crab. So this is the dominant or hostile shark. This is someone who's just trying to get it done, get it done, get it done, get it done. And I want it my way. Oops, I keep doing that. Talkative and chatty blowfish. So this is someone this isn't, you know, necessarily a bad behavior, but this is someone who's just like chit-chatty. You know, they're in a team and they want to know what's going on. They may be doing it for the full group, or they may be doing it just like to the person next to him. Like, oh, that was so awesome. I love that you came up with that idea. They want to they can take up a lot of the floor time. So here, the main thing may be like letting other people share, making sure everyone has a chance to talk. And maybe if you have several talkative, chatty bluefish in your group, a couple things you can do is, one, start to think about how you can facilitate in a way that you go around and get everyone to brainstorm. You can also find time, you know, take a break and let everyone kind of have some chatty time, and then having them come back in. But they can be great too. It's good to have some, you know, positive enthusiasm. They can be a great place to get, you know, conversation starting because they want to talk. We mentioned this a little bit, the idea of the shy and quiet clam. So someone who maybe has a lot of great ideas, but is either not naturally someone who's going to communicate in a group, or someone who wants to make sure when they speak, what they say is the right thing, so that they can be hesitant to try to say something before they're ready. Sometimes it's great to ask those people to speak, but that can also kind of freak them out if they're not ready. So again, finding a time where if you're asking everyone to give a response, maybe giving 2 minutes for everyone to collect their thoughts and write it down, and then doing the round robin can be a great way to get them to engage. Opening it up so that you say, if you have another idea, once we take this break, feel free to shoot it to me and we'll bring it back in. They may come up to you one-on-one or write it down. So finding ways to bring those into the conversation. The entertaining and diverting dolphin. Similar to the blowfish, this is someone who wants to be part of the conversation, but here they may not want to get into the serious stuff. So if you're having a conversation that maybe has some tension to it, or where you have to make a decision that may not please everyone, they may just try to keep it all fun. And it can be okay for someone to make an occasional joke. Gosh, no, I'm now wearing a crab hat. You know, you might want to make a little fun of things. But if it's always light and it stops you from getting your work done, here you might do a quick thank you, let someone else talk. You know, but you guys, we really need to stay on task here. I love that story, but can we come back to the task at hand? The under participator or the apathetic flounder. So this one may sound a little bit like the clam, but unlike the clam, this is someone who just doesn't care. Like they don't want to be there. The clam's thinking and they're probably participating, but they're quiet. But the flounder is just like, I'm either over this or I'm not interested in this topic, or why are we dealing with this conflict? And here, this is a person to ask, you know, do they have any suggestions or what could they do? The argumentative jellyfish, often this is someone who starts to argue with someone else in the room. And or they respond to a comment that someone makes with, I don't think that's right. Yeah, I don't agree with that. And so here, some of your ground rules can help, you know, to assume positive intent, to allow people to speak their mind and represent diverse viewpoints. How can you get those to happen? We did the sea lion. The sea otter is kind of a get everyone to get along. So they're the person who's the yes man. And they may not really think that way, but they're not going to rock the boat. So they're just going to be like, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, that sounds great. And the reason that's a problem is because there may be things that they want to express that they're not bringing into the meeting. And that's a challenger. And then I think this is our last one, the indecisive octopus. What this one is they want to get everything exactly right. And so they may be jumping back and forth. And it's really hard to get a handle on what they're really thinking, because one moment they're thinking this because someone else has said it, and now they're thinking something else, and their mind just keeps shifting, kind of like those 8 arms of an octopus. They're playing in everyone's boat. One of the things that can be good here is to give them time, again, to think. It can be good to have them go first in their conversation so that they're giving their initial reaction versus just hearing what everyone else has said. So this can be one that it's good with having them start versus having, you know, the aggressive shark start and get things rolling. So, so yeah, so I think that's our suite of animals. And like I said, I'll share this with all of y'all so you have it. I know Jeff needed to jump off to take a phone call, and Stephanie, I saw that you said making Pearson a note taker. That can be a really great way to get folks who are dominating conversations to kind of have to listen to other people more, and then have a task to do. So giving someone the role of note taker or timekeeper can be a great way to get them engaged. And they can also, if it's someone who likes to feel important or get appreciated, they're getting that appreciation by serving in that role. So I'm gonna stop sharing again. So that's kind of our animals with a really quick run through of some of the ways you can deal with it. Did any of them strike you, or that you wanted to like kind of just briefly talk about, or have you had an experience with any of them that you're like, oh my gosh, Mary, let me tell you about this shark I know?
I'm the clam at times.
You're the clam. So what do you like if you're a clam? Like I know, you know, one of the things I did was I had noticed you hadn't been speaking, so I was like, Tia, do you have any ideas? Did that help you? Did that make you feel like, or did it kind of freak you out?
No, it didn't freak me out. I just sometimes I have ideas, but I don't want to present them because I don't know if it's going to be right, or if I'm saying the wrong thing, or if someone's not going to like it. So I kind of hold back a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and some of that comes too with just, you know, some of these things change over time in your life. I know you guys probably will not believe this about me because everyone laughs, but I was the shyest kid. I was, and yeah, so like when I was in a classroom setting, like the idea of me speaking up was next to impossible. And, you know, so over time, you kind of build familiarity, you find ways that it works for you. And, you know, I would just suggest, you know, from the participator standpoint, trying to take a chance, because honestly, you know, I sometimes give myself a little bit of a task, like, or I used to, like, you will comment in this meeting. You know what you're doing, you will. And it just once, you know, to build that up, because over time you start to find that gets easier. But yeah, it's good to recognize yourself in those as well. Other thoughts?
What was the next to the last animal?
The next to the last was the otter, the affable, eager otter.
Oh, otter. I think sometimes I'm a combination of the clam and the otter. So
yeah.
And like you said, things change over time in your life. I remember being very young, and I've had bad eyesight my entire life. So the teacher would want to sit me in the front of the room so I could see the board. And then I was in the front, and you always get called on, and it would just scare the living daylights out of me. So
yeah, yeah. Well, and I can be too, I can get cranky. Like if I come into a meeting on a bad day, I can be a crab. Or if I think if we're not getting done what I want to get done, I can recognize that I do recognize that I can sometimes turn into the person like, this isn't going right, and I'm over it. I can't take it. And I have to conscientiously then, you know, now try to catch myself so I don't do that. But I'm aware of it. I don't do well with really poorly run meetings. So yeah. So this hat may be a bit appropriate. I mean, it was a gift when I left Maryland to move to South Carolina as a crab. But maybe I should start to take them to meetings so people can know when I hit that point in the day. Also, if it's later in the afternoon and I've been on 5 virtual conference calls in a row, I may come into the meeting as a bit of a, you know, kind of silent but critiquing individual. So. Any last thoughts? We're 15 minutes over, but I really enjoyed this conversation with y'all, and hope it was helpful and gave you some additional thoughts and ideas. I'll get the PowerPoint to Jeff so he can get it out to folks. He has my contact, so if there's anything I can do, please let me know how I can. Yeah, I'm always happy to, you know, kind of help you guys think through things. And thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you. I found it very helpful, and I'm hanging up wanting more information. So maybe Jeff will let us schedule a part 2.
Okay.
So Stephanie, I want to echo this. I mean, I apologize for having to double book, but it was extremely good to hear. And honestly, I would love to share this information with our crew members, because, you know, they're just beginning this process in their life. And for them to have the information, I think would be great. I don't mind just showing them the video, but the interaction. And so Mary, you were perfect. And I would love for them to hear it too, because they're just beginning to fine tune their skills. And I think it would just be great to hear about. And so very beneficial. So this was a super good investment. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. Okay, well, I will talk with Katie. You probably heard that too. So Katie and Jeff, we can talk about if there's an opportunity to do some ones with individual groups, or if we want to think about doing, what might maybe get some questions about what you might like to hear as a next step if we wanted to do a second one with this group that dug a little bit deeper. So we'll follow up when we send out the PowerPoint and the video. And again, thank you guys for joining. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great.
Bye.